Welcome back to another episode of The Next Baseline with me, Danny DeJesus, where we explore one central question: what do we build now to reach our next baseline? And with that said, for this episode, sometimes moving toward that baseline is not about immediately building something new. It begins with recognizing what behaviors we may be carrying forward, the beliefs, conditioning, and automatic reactions that continue to shape our choices. We often assume that once we recognize our patterns, we should be able to change them. Yet, even with that awareness, we can often find ourselves returning to past behaviors that do not serve us, especially during times of stress, uncertainty, or transition. That space between recognizing a pattern and actually changing it is at the center of my guest's work. Pratiqk Jaani is a London-based business advisor, qualified hypnotherapist, author of Dhrasti, the Perception, and creator of the Dhrasti Method. His work explores how perception and conditioning shape our choices, relationships, and definitions of success. He describes Dhrasti as the awareness behind our thoughts and emotions, the part of us capable of observing our conditioning without remaining controlled by it. His work grew from a personal disruption that he had himself. After being diagnosed with tuberculosis in 2017, Pratiqk stepped away from his career path and began questioning how external achievement could coexist with an internal sense of emptiness. Today, we'll explore where our patterns come from, why recognizing them may not be enough to change them, and how we can begin moving forward with a greater sense of clarity. So with that, Pratiqk, welcome so much. Welcome to The Next Baseline. I'm so happy to have you here, and I've been excited about this conversation.
Thank you so much, Danny, for having me. I'm really looking forward to these conversations.
Yeah, so let's get started because you are very accomplished yourself, especially with your book coming out. So I really wanted to turn this over to you just to get the conversation going. Where tell us more. I know I try to pack as much in there in the intro, but I don't think my intro did you any justice whatsoever. So with that, let me turn it over to you just to go a little deeper and tell us a little bit about yourself, your origin story, your background, things that I may have not covered.
Certainly, I think your intro was bang on, and it really did a good justice, but I'm just going to expand to it. So I was born in India, a family full of teachers, including my parents, grandparents, and other relatives. Age of 18, I came to London to study, and I finished my accounting degree. While working in accountancy course, I worked in an Indian restaurant. After finishing my education, I got an accountancy job the next day. I changed 3 jobs in between. When I was in my second job in the year 2, I was kind of ready to start my business. But for some reasons, which we will explore later, I couldn't start. So I continued working for the same company. Then I moved on to the third company. I worked there for 3 years, and back of my head, I want to start my business soon. That was the thought going on. And then 8 years later, in 2017, I was diagnosed with tuberculosis. And I was in bed for 3 months. The infection was in my spine, so I couldn't stand. And I literally spent 3 months in bed, and something happened. I had this thought: what if I passed away?
Wow. So that's powerful. And already as you were describing your situation, I couldn't help but start thinking, because one of the things that I often personally talk about on The Next Baseline is collapsible life moments. Life is built in moments of collapse. Really, collapse is nothing but information, but oftentimes they're defining moments as well. So when I heard you talk about, what if I died and I have this business and I haven't started it, it's almost like your story would have been like another book that sat in the grave.
Yeah.
One of the quotes I think I heard from somebody a long time ago is that there's so much potential that has been left in the grave because those individuals may have not taken the time to actually do the thing that they wanted to do. So with that, I hear a lot of that. So with that, can you expand, like, what was that like for you to say, I haven't started my business. What if I died? I have these unfinished things. How did that moment, that defining moment, how did that change your life?
So what I really realized is there were certain aspects of why I couldn't start my business. Number one, I was the only bread earner in that at that time. So if I stop working in my job and if I start looking for my own clients, I didn't have a regular income to pay my bills. So that was number one. Number two, my jobs were, the salary was decent. So if, most ordinary guys, or when I say ordinary, is someone who is happy and settled in the job or whatever they are doing, but they are not passionate about doing something big or passionate about doing something huge. So if, the average salary earner guy, if they were getting that level of salary, they wouldn't think of doing the business. So everyone around me was kind of against me doing my business because they wanted good for me. Okay. Because their question is, if you're earning enough money to pay your bills and have a luxury life which you want, why go to the route of uncertainty, whether you have clients or not, whether you'll make it or not? And every time I thought of it, including my parents and my partner and everyone, and they all had a logic. But my inner self really wanted to do the business because I could see a lot bigger picture, which I couldn't prove it to them. And I didn't understand why they don't understand what I'm trying to say. So I was keeping that inside and like, one day that'll happen, one day that'll happen. And I was like, if I save 6 months worth of expenses aside, I will be able to then take that leap. But the life doesn't work like that. I could never save that money because, as I said, I was the only bread earner, and I have been a bit of a spender. So if I have extra cash, I'll just spend somewhere and experience something with that cash. So that didn't happen. But when I asked myself this question, the answer was, I literally lived through those moments if I died. So I actually saw the world, imagined the world without me. So if I were to die today, who's going to pay the bills? Who's going to look after my family? Who's going to, do everything that I'm supposed to do or I'm actually doing right now? And the answer was, things gets taken care of. Yes, there is a struggle. Yes, there are hurdles. Yes, there is a grief and pain which they will all go through. But 6 months, year, 2 years, they'll be out of it. The life goes on. And after 5 years, Pratiqk will be forgotten. Do I really need to die to live the life the way I want? That was the moment.
I think that took me in several directions, because in one hand, I hear you talk about the overall vision, the big picture, what life would be like essentially without you. But then life here with you, you also talk about risk. And I think I often hear that people don't do the things that they want to do because of risk. And I'm all about taking chances, but I'm also all about taking calculated risks and chances. And you mentioned having about 6 months of expenses. So I hear there's some calculated risk there. So yeah. I'm curious to know from you, can you build upon that? And because I think there's something in there to peel the onion back a little bit further, because there's folks out there that are paralyzed and absolutely deathly afraid of the unknown and deathly afraid of transition. So can you peel the onion back on that process of risk and how you go about calculating it?
Certainly. So I think this is what happened. So the fears which were holding me back vanished in that moment. Because what I realized that the risks and fears only exist as long as I'm alive. And if they go with me, like they don't really come with me. I didn't take them with me when I was dead, but they just vanished. So they could potentially be vanished even if I was alive. It's just whether I consider them or not. And then what happens out of nowhere on my Facebook, because I was in bed doing nothing, checking my phones and Facebook. That were, back in those days, it was relatively new. And one of these motivational video came, one Indian motivational person. It was about business, and it literally blew my head, because the principles he mentioned, I don't remember exactly what it was, but he was really making it so simple that you could really take those steps slowly, and you can see that things are becoming positive, and you without realizing, you would go in from negative belief system to positive belief system. It was conscious effort though. And then I watched all his videos in these 3 months. Obviously, I couldn't do anything. I was just building my mindset. So I think one of the good things which happened, which I'm realizing now, is that the fact that I was in bed, couldn't do nothing, it allowed me to absorb as much positive thinking or positive discussion while I was in bed. If it was normal day, I would be so busy with work and everything, and I wouldn't really be able to focus into the subject. But I was allowed to, because the universe had put me in that situation. So what happened is I handed in my notice, and the next day when I had this realization and all the brainstorming with myself, I had it in my notice. I had 3 months notice period, and I couldn't go and find another job. But in this new job, what I thought is, I'm going to be upfront about, I want to start my own business, but I'm not going to be rival to you. I want to take your clients or whatever that may be. And I found another job as a consultant. So legally, I'm entitled to take other clients. And I worked there for about a year and a half. By then, I started building my client base. And when I hit 50% of my monthly income with my business, I quit my job. And I took that leap of faith. And yes, I had 3 months of struggle financially, but I had help from people. Yes, I downgraded my house from 4-bedroom to 2-bed flat, to drop my expenses. But after that, in 3 to 4 months, my monthly income was almost 2.5 times the salary. So within 6 months, I was actually able to pay everything that I didn't pay, or whatever were the hurdles, and I was out of it. And I was only working 1 day a week instead of 5 days a week.
Wow. So, it's crazy. I almost feel like you provided like a blueprint for those that are looking to do something significant. Like, I think a lot of us, especially those entrepreneurs, those maybe, whether there's folks out there that are wanting to do a podcast, wanting to write a book, wanting to work on maybe some new invention, new project, and the list can go on. There's some real struggle that ends up happening. And I think there's a lot of uncomfort. And you talk a lot about not being comfortable, or really you were becoming comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I think as human beings, we often avoid pain, but sometimes to pursue our dreams, there's going to be some pain involved, and it's not going to be some easy process to get through. But the other thing I wanted to hone in on, especially as we're talking about awareness, you mentioned when you're in the hospital bed and you didn't have a choice, but essentially to just be there, but it quelled down the noise. The noise started dying down. And one of the things I often talk about, and not just myself, there's other people that talk about this, the best ideas don't happen in the noise. It happens in the quiet. So for you, what is that process where, why quiet? Why that time to be with yourself? And we can talk about meditation. We don't have to get into spiritual things or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But there's a power, whether it's in the quiet or meditation, just pick your pick, just to sit there with yourself.
I feel what we receive externally, it's actually happening in our conscious mind. So when we are in quiet, we are actually in a relaxed state. And when we are in a relaxed state, our brain frequency drops to theta state, which everyone talks about. So when we are in a theta state, I think what happens is our mind and our intellect can have a one-on-one conversations, because the mind is the what do you call it? It has a million things in it, but the intellect is the calmer. It has all the risk analysis and all of it. So you might want to, jump off the aeroplane. The mind would do it, but the intellect will stop you. And the intellect is actually our inner voice. So when you're quiet, the mind and intellect starts resonating more. So they can evolve. I think they can communicate better, because when we are in public, our mind is externally focused, so it's looking at what other one is saying, and the intellect is just there observing everything, but you don't really have time to feel your own self, so to speak. So I think those 3 months which I spent with myself, I had no one to tell me anything which wouldn't support the transformation of my from negative thinking to positive thinking, which was really good. I wasn't meeting anybody, or I was not that deliberately, but it was just the time. And normally we used to meet friends every week and other, and I used to just keep quiet, and they would think that yes, I'm not well, so I'm quiet. But inside my head, I was just echoing everything that I've been listening to. I didn't know about law of attraction back in those days. I didn't know how quantum mechanics worked. I knew nothing, but just the motivational speaking. And I figured out later that what I was listening to was a motivational talk. I just thought somebody sharing their experience, which was the truth. But how I think I had one mindset that if I see something or learn something, something will tell me from within, what is that I can experience? What is that I can apply? And that's probably one of the reasons I was a really good consultant, because when I learn a rule or learn a principle, my next process is how many clients I can apply this to and how they can benefit. And my brain will pull out a list of clients that these are the one I need to approach. And I think that really helped me with my personal growth. So if I learn a strategy or a trick, the very first thing I will do is experiment it. So I was doing it, and it became very easy to overcome fear and the challenges and the uncertainty, because I literally lived my death in my head. So what worse can happen? And if you think it through all the way in your head, so you know that you're not really going through that, but imagining that will actually clarify a lot of things, and you will feel, oh, there is nothing to feel fearful about. What worse can happen? Even today, if I feel if everything that I'm doing, it collapses, what worse can happen? Nothing. I might not be able to pay my rent. My landlord would kick me out. I can get a shelter somewhere. I can at least do something, some physical work to do my, living. Because I don't have fear of people judging me. I don't have fear of people criticizing me. I have no fear left now. So the only way to overcome fear is actually just think it through, what worse can happen, and go to the extreme level, and you'll be like, that's doable.
I am trying so hard to build this crescendo for this podcast, and I feel like the topics that you're covering is making it so difficult to just diving into your work, because one of the things I hear you talk about almost is, and you could tell me if I'm right or wrong here, but it's like the sense that the ego is dead, or the ego has taken a back seat. Because oftentimes what stops us, more often than not, I think sometimes, is that sense of self, otherwise known as the ego. And I don't think ego is bad, and ego is here to protect us. And we need the ego, but the ego can't always be in the driver's seat. So with that, I feel like we should get deeper dive into your mindset, where talk more about Dhrasti, your business, how'd you get to, so really like dive in the heart of it.
Yeah. I think this was the struggle element. Okay. And if I then literally just summarize in like fast forward thing, from motivation, I went to some spiritual. So I was initiated by Sadhguru. I listened to all his videos. Although in reality, once I got initiated, the practices I was told to do every single day, I could only do it for one day. And then I couldn't sustain that because I had already a busy routine and I couldn't do it. Then a few years later, I went to Kriya Yoga. I became a student. I finished everything a student is expected to. And then I got initiated by it. I did it for 4 months and then I withdrew from it. But in between, I came across The Secret movie and The Secret book, The Law of Attraction. And on YouTube, there are millions of different people teaching Law of Attraction and the tiny bits of the main parts of Law of Attraction. And I practiced every single thing. I then went to Peru and did some psychedelic experiences, and which was
Did you
really.
Was it ayahuasca that you
So
ended?
I was supposed to do ayahuasca and San Pedro, but the shaman said they have to do a reading. If ayahuasca accepts me, I can do it. If it doesn't, I can't. So obviously ayahuasca rejected me, but San Pedro accepted me. So I had 2 doses of that over 2 weeks, which was incredible experience. But I didn't know what that meant. And it took me a while to integrate with that. And now I know what it meant. And then I came across rapid transformational therapy, the hypnotherapy by Marisa Peer. And that was one of the biggest transformation for me. And I think a lot of things I was experiencing and I was living and I was doing and I was shifting. The books I read, like Think and Grow Rich, and every positive mindset book, every personal development book I read, I knew that this can change logically, but it wasn't really changing. But when I did hypnotherapy, I actually learned the actual process of how our brain or our mind gets conditioned. And due to that conditioned, we experience certain emotions and how we can change it. And I was hypnotizing people on self-doubt or anger and fear, not having partner or not receiving love or not feeling enough, weight loss, etc. And what I discovered, there was something very common in everything, that everyone who was experiencing negative emotions or not happy with their life, the reason was they were conditioned to experience it that way. And what I was doing is I was interrupting those patterns. There are techniques. So you follow those steps and you interrupt those patterns, and the client, you guide them with the instructions, and they're able to remove those beliefs and plant positive beliefs with meaning positive affirmations about themselves or how they really want to experience life. And then we give them a recording which they listen for 30 days, and everyone give me feedback saying this is life-changing. Just one session. Like normal hypnotherapy, you have to take once a week or once a month for 6 months, 12 months. This one, just one session, and the problem's over. So it was really, really powerful. And I wanted to kind of write a book about perception, like how we perceive life, because from our negative beliefs and negative conditioning, and we can change it. In the process of writing the book, I was meditating and I was thinking about the chapters and flows and everything, like a self-critic in the middle of the book. And I had this idea or a question, so to speak, that we are experiencing life negatively because we are conditioned that way. And what we are really doing as a therapy is changing that negative conditioning to positive conditioning to experience life positively. But what are we if we had no conditioning? Because if something, yeah, and that moment, I felt something which was identical to what I experienced in my San Pedro session, but I couldn't name it at that time. It happened later on. It was complete blank. Because what I realized is through the conditioning, I created my identity. It was my conditioned identity. This is Pratiqk. He's an accountant. He's a kind person. He gives a lot of care and concern and love to people because he wants to receive. All this programming took an identity, which was me, and I existed through that identity. And when I went to this state of blankness, It was breathtaking. I was scared. I'm like, if everything that I believed I was learned, that means it isn't me. Then who am I? Where do I belong? What about these family members and everything, which I feel I'm so much connected, but they are all learned relations. So everything which I believed to be real collapsed in that moment, which was really, really difficult moment for me.
Pratiqk, I gotta interject here because I feel like, at least for me personally, this really hits home. And it was not through a psychedelic. It was several weeks ago. I had a very lucid dream. In fact, in another podcast interview that I had, we talked a little bit about this. But I ended up, and I thought I was going crazy until I Googled it like a couple days later, but I ended up in this place that I call the void. And it was this place just stripped of nothing. You were everything and nothing all at the same time. But you weren't, I forgot my name. I forgot that, this existence of Earth existed and all of that. And what I clearly remember is there was this freedom when I wasn't just tied to who Danny was. And then after I came out of that dream, there's this process of integration I think I drove myself crazy for about a good week trying to research all this. So I'm very intrigued in terms of what this psychedelic experience was for you, because to me, there seems to be very close ties to how I experienced, whether it's God, the universe, higher consciousness. And for me, it was through very much so lucid dream, but the elements here are very, very similar.
Yeah, I feel it's quite identical. So in my very first dose, on the day one, we were 4 people, and other 3 were returned to normal consciousness in 4 hours. I came back after 19 hours. The shaman was scared that I'm not gonna make it back. That he was so sure. He was literally scared. And basically what I saw was complete darkness. There was nothing there. And what I felt, that is entire nothing, is me. And I was trying to make sense of what it is, but it feels like this is me. But I can't really be sure about it, but it feels me. And then far away, there was one tiny light, very little. And when I started staring at it, it came close to me. And I was trying to figure out what it is, but then you intuitively get the answers what it is, or maybe there are whispers. And what it saw me is the complete observable physical universe for that tiny dot compared to this complete darkness, which was the nothingness. And it also said that it was created. I mean, this is a metaphoric, and I think I'm going to talk about why I felt it that way later on. Is, Krishna, Lord Krishna, which is, very popular in Eastern scriptures. He played his flute, and the waves from that flute was the initiation of creating the physical world. This is what I saw. And it made sense. And then 4 or 5 days later, I had another dose of San Pedro. And what I saw this time, I was in the physical world, but all I could see is vibration. The olden time TV, when there is no channel or nothing coming, they're like black and white dots go. I don't know what they are called.
No, I don't know what they're called here, but I'm familiar with what you're talking about.
But you know what I mean. So I could feel that, but then say the white is positive and red is negative. Oh, sorry, black is negative and white is positive. And what I could see is I could make a shape. So what it was really showing, that what I see in real, they're literally those waves, the vibrations. So I'm a person, I can see as a vibration. The other person is a vibration. The space between is also a vibration. When I'm saying something to other person, whatever is the message, it's the vibrations were coming out of my mouth. The other person was listening, so it's entering into that person's system. And depending on what I said, the person's vibration shifted. What that meant is if I cracked a joke and that person received that humor and he was laughing, so he wasn't laughing before, it was a different frequency, and now he's laughing. So from my vibration, I released certain, so the vibrations interacted with another person's vibrations, and that created impact. And everything was vibration.
And it's white noise. You just reminded me. So it's the white. So got it. So you're seeing everyone in terms of like white noise.
Yeah. So then I realized that what I saw as a darkness was me. But I don't teach that into Dhrasti Method because I haven't learned to attain that state without any substance or anything like that. But what I did feel that state when I was doing the meditation was similar to that. Is a state. It's not physical. It doesn't have any emotions. It doesn't have any words. It doesn't have any thought in it. It cannot be explained. It was that state. And what I saw is that I can consciously see what my mind is thinking. That mind, the thought, then created the vibration, which was learned as part of conditioning. So like if the thought is anger, it creates the vibration of anger. It then gives me the emotional experience of anger, and then I'm shouting out, that's my physical reaction. So that was a loop. But what I saw is with this state, I went into my childhood when I was 1 month old. I saw that this state was there. And I didn't understand a word. I couldn't speak anything, but I knew I was there. This state was there. Then I went to some happy moments of my life. And I saw this part was there, this state was there. It wasn't happy. It was experiencing or watching me experience the happiness. Then I went to some of my difficult times, some of my sad moments. And this part was there, unaffected. It was watching me experiencing the worries, experiencing the sadness. And what I realized is the conditioning was purely for us to experience life, but somehow we took that conditioning as identity, what we call ego. And we do everything to survive, to keep the ego safe. So everything we expect, everything we feel disappointed for, and our coping mechanism to overcome those disappointments are all product of conditioning. But the real self has got nothing to do with any of that. It only calls it experience. There is no good and bad. There is no failure or success. There is no happiness. There is no sadness. They're all different experiences. So I started delabeling the experiences, which literally changed everything. So the ending of the book became something very different to what I initially thought. So now the book takes you to the real me and see the life from the real me. So
yeah, so no, I just had a question just based off of that because and I don't disagree with anything that you're saying because I've had lots of experiences that'll definitely much so align, especially during my lucid dream at the time when I the moment I was in the void, I could see and understand 100% everything you're saying. But I don't think the world, if someone, if a new individual that's coming across this like fully understands that, because we live in a very polarized world. It's either black or white. It's either good or bad. Hurting people is a real feeling. So, Pratiqk, from your perspective, how can we see the world from a different lens just with this knowledge to say, yeah, negative things happen, but how can we use that to progress forward or to live at a higher state than what we may have, whether through anger or any other type of emotions that are uncomfortable?
So I think the very simple thing which I learned, and if everyone asks me, what is that one thing we can do today? I recommend this. First of all, be honest with yourself and accept what you're feeling. That's the simplest formula. So if I'm used to getting angry, which I don't like, so what happens is every time I'm angry, I feel more sad, or I feel guilt. So the only reason I felt guilt is because I didn't accept that I'm getting angry. So once you accept, you only have one emotion to deal with. If you don't accept, you have two emotions to deal with. So the very first thing is accept. The second thing is ask yourself, why did you really have to get angry? And see, we learned, I've heard this many times, take a pause, right? But in reality, you don't remember to take a pause because you just act it out. And then you remember that, oh, I had to take a pause. I know why that happens, which we will talk about it later. But even if you couldn't take pause, when you're reflecting, just revisit that event and find out, ask yourself a question, what exactly triggered the anger? Because then you have enough time to analyze that event. And you will learn something that actually you could have avoided the anger. So when you are doing it next time, maybe there is a little pause you won't notice, but if you keep analyzing those experiences, you will actually start getting more clarity. And when you know what the conditioning is and how conditioning works, the result of that analysis is a lot deeper. It's more profound. So instead of you doing 10 analyses, now with just once or twice, you'll be able to identify, oh my God, this is something I learned. And when you realize from deeper self that this is something you learned, it's easy to let go of it. It's like you see a magic trick and you're fascinated by it. You love it because you cannot figure out how it's been done. But then an hour later, the magician shows how he does it, and now you know the trick. And because you know this is the trick, and hence you thought it was magic, is no longer magic, it doesn't give you the same excitement. So you get angry. And when you learn how you got angry, the anger loses its power. Because now you can choose not to get angry. You can easily reprogram it.
So real quick, so with respect to barriers, because I mean, there's a lot of great things. There's even things like when I've gone through even my own personal rounds of like therapy type sessions, you know, a lot of them recommend doing, I would say, bits and pieces of that, probably not all of it at once. But anyways, I digress. So, but I think there's, you know, sometimes I think people are not used to that process. So there's barriers to get to everything that we're talking about here. So what would you tell folks out there in terms of to get to that point where they can even just have a conversation with themselves and, you know, just confronting the truth of what it is and confronting reality? What would you have to say to those individuals that just to get started onto that, how can they navigate their own personal barriers, if that makes sense?
It does. I think there are two things which we need to look at. Number one, I mean, I'll give an example. I have so many friends, and when they get to know about this hypnotherapy and things like that, they say, oh, you must hypnotize my partner, or you must hypnotize so and so person, which are keen to them. And I tell them one thing, that unless the person wants to change something within, no therapy would work. It's quite similar to, you know, the lion is a king of the jungle, but he would only go out if he's hungry. If he's not hungry, he wouldn't go. And what I mean by that is, if an individual is accepting to himself that I do get this anger and I don't like it and I want to work on it, the first important barrier is already gone. And then the steps, a process starts for them to discover and learn about how they first learn to get angry. Because in my experience, I never got angry, but I used to be upset. I would be feeling very sad because of the situation. And there is a process why some people learn to react out the unpleasant situation with anger, and some people choose to react with just keep it inside and don't let it out. Again, it goes back to the, you know, foundation of safety, you know, flight or fight kind of scenario. But if they are willing to change themselves, I think, 5 minutes to analyze a moment when you were angry, you could be doing, you could do that while you're driving. You could do that when you're at the traffic signal. You can even, when you're in a toilet, you can think about it, right? You don't need to be in a meditative state, wake up 4 a.m., and do it. No, you can do it anytime. Even 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Just think what just happened. Like when we watch sports and there is a moment where the umpire cannot, like cricket, they do third umpire and they go an action replay and they see the cameras and see whether the ball hit the stump or not. That's exactly what we are doing. What exactly trigger me to get my anger out? Or if it's fear, what exactly I'm fearful about? So when you ask yourself that question, whatever comes out, be honest and own it, because it's yours. Because when you own it, the next layer opens up automatic. And then you go, the next question, where did that come from? What else could I have done if I didn't want to get angry? And it will just give you answers. We might find ways how to get answers externally, but the answers are always within us.
No, and that's an interesting perspective, because you hear a lot in the coaching community, for example, that you're not necessarily giving a client or an individual the answer, and coaching is about essentially how to get those answers out of the person. And so I see some resemblance to that, but you definitely go much deeper into that, and I think this is a good segue to get into Dhrasti. And I'm curious, how did you come up with that name Dhrasti? Where did it come from? And then tell us more about the Dhrasti method. I assume that we've gotten into bits and pieces and we definitely talked about it, but now I just want to be a little bit more deliberate in having that conversation.
Sure. So Dhrasti is a Sanskrit word, and what it means is perception. It's actually deeper than perception. So if I give an example, we can see the world or a city where we are in from the ground level. And if there is a mountain or something, you can go on top of it and see the same town. It would look different, right? So when we see life from conditioned self, our life experiences is different. And when we shift the Dhrasti from the conditioned self to the real self, the life experience is different. So Dhrasti literally represents the shift from the conditioned self to the real self. It's as simple as that. The Dhrasti method is actually an immersive experience, which is combination of every technique that I learned and that worked, which can allow people to not waste so much time into trying different things. And I'll explain why not everything, because I tried it. I spent 14 years trying different things, and I know what works.
Yeah,
right?
tell us about that, because here's the thing, right? You're essentially an expert here, and I think there's something very, very powerful. In fact, you found the multiple different ways, and you came back to live to tell the tale. And so,
Absolutely.
I want to make sure. Yeah, I want to make sure that people understand, like super understand, that Kitty, know what you're talking about, and you're sharing some deep knowledge here. Sorry about that. Just wanted to say
that's perfectly fine. So I created Dhrasti method, where people not only identify or learn something, and I say, do not believe me, only experience it for yourself. I'm going to guide you, because once it becomes your experience, you don't need me to validate, or you don't need anybody to validate, because that's your own experience. It's like, I give you a chili to try and you take a bite. You don't need me to tell you how spicy it is, because you know it. And that's exactly what happens. So if I give a little small perspective on what really happens. So we live life from conditioned self. And when you go and see all the key emotions in your childhood, how you learned it, that's your experience of trying that chili. Like, okay, this is how I learned it. The second thing is, I would give a small example. If you were asked to stand on a busy street for 10 minutes and count how many red cars passes by in each direction, you would do that exercise and come back and say, Pratiqk, there were 14 red cars. And then I would ask how many white cars, how many gray cars, how many black cars, and you don't know because you're only focusing on red cars. So the red car was your experience, and the instruction that were given to you to look at the red car is actually your nervous system. The state, our inner state, gives instruction to our five senses what to perceive. Now, conditioning creates lack in us because once you study, you get a good job. Once you get a good job, you get more money. When you earn more money, you want even more money. You need to be successful. You want love and relationship. Your partner completes you. All these things, until that happens, gives you sense of lack, the feeling of lack. And your nervous system is trained with lack. So no matter how much you receive, you're always going to feel lack because that's your red car. So when you look at the gratitude practice, what it's doing is asking you to write down the white cars, the black cars, and silver car, which means you write down everything that you have and you're grateful for. So that's a shift. That's a very small, very like 0.01% shift from the lack to what you have. And trust me, if you do that every day, it feels amazing. If you skip it for a week, you're back to square one because it's a conscious effort. The actions come from subconscious, right? Now, how do we change the nervous system? Now, without understanding the mechanism, we can't really change it. If you buy an electric gadget and there are lots of buttons and you don't know how they works, what you do is look at the user manual. Unfortunately, we don't have one, so we need to identify. And thanks to the time we are born, a lot of things are already there for us to see something, read something, but that's not enough. We need to experience it. Because if the manual says press the red button, it will turn it on. We press it, and if it works, then only we accept it. If it doesn't, then we say the manual is wrong. So this is the proven technique. So we understand that we learned to experience everything that we experienced from our childhood. And it got divided into 4 layers. One is the thought, one is the vibration, one is the emotion, and the physical action. These 4 things are creating a state of nervous system. Now the thought we can observe and the physical action we can observe. Everything else is intangible. They're not in our conscious experience. So what is not in our conscious experience? It represents majority of the value. That's our unconscious, where we are aware, our awareness isn't there. And if you want to change something permanently, you got to leave new imprint in all 4. And most programs outside, which are personal development or personal growth or whatever we name it, they work either 1 or 2 of these. And most of them are focused on conscious, which works. I'm not saying they wouldn't work, but they would take a lot of time. It's like instead of watering the plant to the root, you sprinkle water on the leaves. That's how long it takes for the water to go in and then feed the plant.
So one more time. So you mentioned the four buckets just for so folks don't have to rewind to that because I think even for me, this is something I didn't even really think about myself. To your point, I do understand like the thought, the feeling, and then the action and everything else in between. But you put it in such a way that I think it's even making it easier to understand and connect the dots. So what are those 4? What are those 4 buckets again?
So one is a mind, where we have a thought. So let's say as a child, we witness an event. We don't know what that means, but father walks into the house, throws his office bag one corner of the living room and sits on a sofa and say, "What a horrible day, I'm so much stressed." So there are a number of things happening. We are seeing he's tired, exhausted. He's given a word, stress. So we learned a word, stress. And he's feeling. So we are also learning the feeling attached with that stress word, right? So now it completes a loop over the 4 things. So the energy, the tone, the sound waves are representing the vibration of that emotion, which is now programmed in this child. And the father doesn't come home just once in his childhood, isn't it? It's like 100 times or 500 times. So, when we were a kid, we learned to write these alphabets and we do like number 1 and then we write over it, then we over it. And 50 times we know how to write number 1. So again, there was a first neurological pattern about stress. Then the father came in again like that, another layer. Then you were watching movie and there is another actor or one of the character who's stressed, and you observe it and it matches. It just gets stronger. When you go to work and you had a busy day, you're going to come back and act out exactly like that. And because we see everyone else like that and we call it normal. So we've learned what is stress. Now, if you think of a word stress, automatically it will create those vibrations. It will create those emotions. And it will also give you that physical action of that stress in the, your breath goes short. And when you are in that state, your brain frequency is at the state of stress, and you will think of every moment in your past where you felt stressful. Because that's your transmit, that's what you are setting at. So what you see outside is more stressful situation.
And then that plays into the rest of our lives and how we show up. And then
Exactly.
we get into our patterns, we get into our loops, and then it just repeats. And Dhrasti is essentially, I hear, is you're becoming aware of these things and you have an opportunity to short circuit it. Am I understanding that?
So, absolutely. So if I finish that example of father walking house, so now it's no longer father because you've grown. So conscious is what is out there, it's present. Subconscious is emotional brain. So when you see yourself from real self, you observe these 4 layers, and all you really do is you realize that you learned from here, like your father or the TV or your neighbor. Now, yeah, I had a busy day, but I did what I had to and it's done. Now I'm home. I need to be chilling. I need to be relaxing. That will rewrite the pattern. Because you're doing from within, it's easy to just change it. Now, if you went on any personal development, say, do some deep breaths and trying to forget. So what you're really doing is not addressing, instead you're distracting yourself. So that will give you temporary relief. But when you're not doing it, you come back. People tend to have alcohol to release the stress. It's not really getting rid of the stress. It's distracting. So Dhrasti method really allows you to see things from the root, understand the whole mechanism, and change the life experience.
Gotcha. So it's going to the origin, down to
yes.
No, but already I know you had more there. So, I'm just in a pause just because there's just so much to that. And, I know you spent a lot of time, but for a lot of folks out there, like this is a very, very new process, maybe potentially for a lot of people, even myself, because, I spend time a lot in the quiet in my life. I spend a lot of time in reflection. In fact, a lot of what you talk about, I even talk in my own framework through C2R2E: collapse, confrontation, realignment, reclamation, elevation. But even that 5-phase process, for those that have never done work with themselves, can even be a difficult process. And even something like C2R2E, I tell folks that this is not a 1-week journey. It is not a 2-week journey. It's a long journey just to understand yourself. But then even when you get to a point of elevation, which just simply means that you're living from a higher state, that's a lifelong process. And the intent is you help someone else along the way. And so throughout this whole conversation, I would say everything that you have said and mentioned and talked about, I think even expanded my own work and even my own understanding as a collective. And so, I really appreciate, everything that you're saying, because it deeply connects where I'm going as well in my own journey of life as well.
No, that's great. And I think I used to believe that because, growing up in Indian family, very close to the scriptures and daily rituals of prayers and whatnot, I always questioned, and unfortunately, no one had the answer I was looking for, because they were all following the beliefs without experiencing or understanding, or without asking question. They just did it because they were told, and they never even had the question. But I had those questions, so I was searching for the real answers. And what I realized is all those methods and scriptures, most of them said it's a lifelong work. And sometimes I heard you can't acquire this in one lifetime. It needs multiple lifetimes. Now that's another subject. We can talk another
Sure.
time. But there was one book, which was an audio book, which I listened, and I only did the one chapter. That was about 6 years ago. And it said, there's one line which literally stayed with me until my realization, and then I leave that line. It says, whatever you're really looking for, it is right there, right now within you, but you're not looking at it. And I felt something in that moment, but I couldn't name it because I didn't have the vocabulary to explain what it is. But after that, when I really realized the state, and when I mentioned earlier, like I went to my childhood and see what this part was doing, then I went to my happy moment and sad moment. It was always there. But I didn't see. The thing is, even if we felt, we didn't know what we are looking for. So you got on a car and you're out of it. You're driving around, but you don't know where you need to go. So you could be going in a circle around your destination, but you don't know what it feels like or what it looks like. And how I discovered is, I think what really helped me is when I had my actual 14 years journey, there were different interpretation of this state. So when I experienced this state, I was scared to start with, but over 2 to 3 weeks, I was going for 5 minutes and come back and trying to make sense. And slowly, I was able to connect all those interpretation of this state. And then I realized this is something I heard 6 years ago, that what you're looking for is right there. And when I see the life and every possible complex question and trying to answer from this real state, it all made sense. And not only it answered my questions, but any person, any podcast, any difficult question I'm asked, the answer comes from that state and it's there and it's bang on. So I have to believe it because it's my experience. Now I can't deny that. And because it was so easy and because I made few people experience that state in 10 minutes, I was so confident that the whole transformation can be done in 3 days, and hence the 3-day method. And the real purpose of me doing this, because I've seen in my journey, I know so many people are going through same struggle and same hurdle, same pain. Unfortunately, we are not able to communicate with people because we have a fear of being judged. We have fear of sharing out our weak moments or our weaknesses. We are only used to sharing the good things, not the difficult parts. And hence, this is a way to reach out to them and tell them, whatever you've been doing and you're not getting what you want, it's available right here, right now. And it's possible.
It's interesting because you mentioned something like putting words to something that you can put words to, and then the conventional wisdom and practices, it sounded like it wasn't quite enough. And those same words, I say was even true for myself. When I created C2R2E, it was because literally I was walking through experiences that, for example, Pratiqk, I was told you need to pray more, you need to go to church more, you need to read your word or your scriptures more, you need to do all these things as if there was some sort of checklist. And, none of that made me happier. None of that made me more connected. If anything, I felt more disconnected with myself. And then ironically, there was like this inner voice within myself saying, this is not right. And I remember stepping back even as I was going through a church sermon one time, and I would see everyone else around me, and I was like, and I just couldn't buy in fully, and not because I think church or Christianity or any of that is wrong or what have you, but there was just something about Christianity for me, at least here in America, that was just not resonating with me. And so as part of my story, I eventually left. And no, honestly, I don't have any regrets. And throughout my life, especially as I started exploring my own work, I get to meet folks like yourself. I get to meet other folks that we may talk about, we talk about the same concepts, we may describe them all differently. And it's interesting when you talk about 14 years, different things that you have done, but I'm discovering more and more, even for myself, that there's a lot of us out there. There's a community of people that we're all talking about the same exact thing, maybe through different lenses and different experiences when it comes down to life transformation.
Yeah. I think in my experience, there are a lot of communities or practices aim at this real me or real self, but most of them talk about things or showing ways of transforming, remaining within conditioning. And that is a really, really hard path. But to be honest, I wouldn't say this one of the technique I tried and it didn't work. I think they were all the steps for me to get here where I am. Because if I didn't try, if I didn't learn any of it, I wouldn't have experienced this. So they served me for the time I had to learn something from it. But as soon as I learned, I moved on. So, you might come across a technique where you resonate and you do everything that you were asked, and then you suddenly withdraw from it. Because we don't realize, but our awareness was expanding to some degree, practicing that. But that practice was not strong or powerful enough to make you experience what you really wanted to experience or what you really needed to experience. So you go on to the next one, then next one. But I think when I studied quantum mechanics in deep for about 4 to 5 months, spent 3-4 hours a day, and then trying to apply those things with my experiences and certain practices I did by myself, and this process of the book. And I think there's one habit of connecting dots. I think that's an automatic process through most people. That's what really created this experience. And then when you go back, now if I practice those techniques, it will work because I know what they were aimed at and I know why they couldn't work at that time, like law of attraction. The very first thing, that important step they mention is let go. Now, there are a lot of contradictions in law of attraction process. So the one I learned was, number one, visualize or think positive. Think what you want as if you already have it. So I'm thinking I have 10 million pounds. Money is the simplest example, right? I have 10 million pounds. And then there's the inner voice saying, no, you don't. And I still try and override that noise. Now I do have it. You don't know. It's secret. And then I visualize. Though I visualize a big mansion and expensive cars and branded clothes, and that's all we can think of when you think of yourself being rich. The third step is feel. Now that's where I would struggle because I never had 10 million pounds to feel what it feels like to have 10 million pounds. So again, there is a contradiction. And the third step was letting go, which means you forget about it. Now, the very reason I was doing this exercise is for me to have 10 million, and now I have to forget, right? So how this is going to work? So I literally forget that I practice. I wasn't, because that's the best I could understand. If I do the law of attraction now from real self, I'm operating from wholeness. So I can think that I'm manifesting $10 million. There is no inner voice because I'm talking from something deeper than inner voice now. Then I'm visualizing what I want or what I'm having, what I'm doing with that money. Number 3, I'm feeling it because yes, having money is an experience. It's not there to fulfill me. The reason it didn't work before because I wanted money to fill the fulfillment and I was operating from lack. So there is no way you can feel fulfilled. But now I'm operating from fulfillment. So even if I didn't make 10 million, I'm still whole. I'm still complete. So it was easy to let go. Simple process.
It's interesting. I think that's going to be a hot take for the secret and law of attraction community, because that's truly a very different perspective. But it's almost like what I hear you talking about is you're remembering what it feels like to experience something versus you're trying to conjure up how it's supposed to feel. So does that sound about right?
Absolutely. So when you operate from wholeness, take an example of you're the ocean. So if you suddenly receive 1 million liter water, you're still the ocean, you're not affected. You're not gonna feel, wow, I've got extra million liter water. No. And if you lose 2 million liter water, you're still the same ocean. So if you make money, you are the ocean. If you lose money, you are still the ocean. The wholeness, the completeness, the fulfillment is a state. It cannot be determined by some numerical values or material wealth or material objects. So whether you have that material things or not, you're still whole, you're still complete. So that's where you're not chasing anything. And when you don't chase anything, you become magnet and you attract experiences. That's what we are really looking to do, is experience the life. Manifest experiences, not material objects. And what you really wanted to feel when you had 10 million pounds is fulfillment. Now, if you're already feeling fulfillment, then whether you have a million, 10 million, or 10,000, you are fulfilled.
And you know what? And I think this is a great segue to really talk about like where can we find you, because I think this is a very powerful message. There was moments here that I did not expect to talk about that we dove into, and I think what you just said, striving for experiences, because everything else is, should be feeding or helping for us to achieve those experiences. So I think this is a really great segue to talk about where can folks find your work, and where can they connect with you?
Certainly. So I'm actually repositioning the whole Dhrasti method, because we spoke about understanding is important. The user manual needs to be there. So from that you can experience something. So I'm actually in a process of finalizing a foundation course for Dhrasti, and that teaches every tiny bit of human experience. That's like a user manual of our life experience. And once people do that, it's online, will be readily available after 25th of August. They can do that course, and then they enter a Dhrasti circle, a community where we can have a personalized question answers, and wherever they are stuck or they don't feel clarity, I can answer that. And we would be organizing 3-day immersive experiences worldwide as the time go by, and they can join that. So the website is called dhrastimethod.com. It has a lot of information right now. Don't know exactly when this episode is going to be out, but if it's after 25th of August, they are going to see the latest version of the offering.
Yeah, my goal is to put this out as quickly as possible, just because I don't ever like for great messages to stay in the queue for
I appreciate that.
For a long time. So I will do my best to get this out as quick as I can. But
Excellent.
with that, Pratiqk, is there anything else you wanted to leave, or any closing message here? Because again, I even took a lot to think about, even in myself.
I think one message I would tell people is, anytime you feel you are not enough, because that's one fundamental or the key feeling everyone carries in a different extent, is I'm not enough. And when you think of successful people, we are hugely successful, and you think you can never get there. Just think, when we were born, we were all the same. So if one can do something, you can too. You just need to learn how. So be open to ask question, why did you learn to not do something? If you have self-talk every day, 5 to 10 minutes, I think that's a really great beginning. And the only condition is be honest and go deeper in asking questions. These two things. If you do that without any effort, you will see the shift in your own experiences. And that's the beginning.
No, amazing, and it's amazing what you're doing, and thank you so much for really taking the time and joining me here on the Next Baseline, and then also sharing your story, your work, and then your perspective. So with that, over to the audience, I think that this conversation reminds us that awareness is important, but awareness is only the beginning, and recognizing the patterns shaping our inner lives gives us really an opportunity to pause, question what has been guiding us, and also to decide whether we want to continue living from that same place. Having a greater sense of clarity does not necessarily mean the absence of difficult emotions or uncertainty, but rather it may mean becoming more capable of recognizing what is happening within us without automatically allowing an old pattern to determine what we do next. So for everyone listening today, perhaps a question to carry with you forward is not only what patterns are shaping the inner life, but then also, now that I can see them, what will I choose to build differently? So you can find, as Pratiqk mentioned, you can find everything you need to know about him and his work. You'll find them in the description that I have in the episode below. And with that said, this has been another episode of The Next Baseline, where we continue to ask the question, what do we build now to reach our next baseline? And until next time, take care of yourself and keep moving toward your next baseline.